Hello, welcome to Ars Arcanum, a podcast about Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere books. I'm norablake. I'm joined by Tilly.
Hi there, that's me.
That's you. Who are you joined by?
And I'm joined by Autumn.
Hi, that's me.
That's you.
I also go by Allison, but I kind of prefer Autumn this week. I don't know.
We read Elantris chapters 4 through 6 today, and we'll get to that in a second. We've also been reading other things.
Who wants to go first? I can go first.
Sure.
So I read a couple things recently. One is that I've been over the last 12 months at this point, I've been reading Ursula K. Le Guin's Earthsea series. I read Tahanu in the break between episodes, which I think is really fantastic. I think Le Guin is the very far opposite end of the fantasy spectrum as Sanderson is,
yeah.
And so it's like a very different vibe from this.
Do you think he's read very much Le Guin?
Yes, actually,
Okay.
there's for some reason I googled Brandon Sanderson, Ursula Le Guin. I think I wanted to see if they'd ever talk to each other, and what I found was an essay that Brandon wrote that was basically listen, guys, not all science fiction is going to have literary value like Ursula K. Le Guin. Sometimes it's going to be like my stuff, and that's okay.
Ursula OK Le Guin.
But they're very different things that I love for very different reasons. Tahanu is really fantastic. I thought Tahanu's the fourth book in the series. The third book, The Farthest Shore, had been kind of a letdown for me, even though it ended really strong. And so Tahanu I thought was a really good return to just damn, this book is great. And this book is great for the reasons that I think the first two are. So, and then I've also been keeping up with the podcast Just King Things. So I read Carrie, the first Stephen King novel, and I'm about halfway through Salem's Lot, which is just trashy and great and so scared of gay people. But, it's a good book despite all the weird fears the King is expressing in that book.
I feel like that's what you want in horror on some level, is some weird fears.
Yeah, you want to get a vision of oh, this guy has some weird hang-ups.
Why do they hate Russians?
No Russia in this book, really. No.
I meant Dracula.
Oh, yeah. Dracula hates because Salem's Lot, King is literally just doing the plot of Dracula in so many ways. He's just lifting scenes from Dracula and putting them into
there's that one where that guy pours the other guy a drink and just stares at him the whole time in this foot tall flute.
Is that what Dracula is like? Maybe I need to...
That's what Nosferatu the Vampire is directed by Werner Herzog.
I do not like Dracula the novel very much, but Herzog's Nosferatu is one of the best movies.
I think it's definitely in my top 4 on my Letterboxd. Along with Van Helsing from 2004.
Yeah.
I might need to run to the restroom real quick, so you two should talk about books.
You did drink coffee today.
I'm sorry that I will not be participating in the rest of the segment. I will be back just as soon as I can, okay?
It's all good. I'd be happy to go.
Yeah, sure.
So I have not been just reading any books on my own for fun. That's kind of hard for me to do, actually. But I have been reading a lot because I've been reading for this, and then I have another book podcast, and then also this is not content, but it is a sort of it's a thing that another person is involved in, so it gets me to actually read. I have been over the course of the past several months, I've been slowly reading aloud a trilogy of books to my best friend over the phone. This is the Short Sun trilogy by Gene Wolfe, which is Gene Wolfe is also like a fantasy writer who writes fucking tomes that are in long ass series. So his like best work is the Solar Cycle, and he wrote 4 books and then another one. So there's like a 5-book series, and then there's a 4-book series, and then there's a 3-book series, and the last one is the one that I've been reading to Ben.
It takes a specific type of author to call your series a cycle.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, it does.
Especially if it's not actually a cycle, like...
It's not actually cyclical.
The Aragon series is called the Inheritance Cycle, but it's not a cycle. And cycles aren't a theme.
Yeah, okay. I want to give Gene Wolfe some credit here. Cycles are a theme in the Solar Cycle. It is about shit, like, repeating itself. The basic, how do I summarize the basic premise of it? The basic premise of it is that the sun is fucked.
Okay.
So the first, 4 books are all set on, a super far future Earth, quote unquote, where the sun is, dying and, huge and red. So, stars are visible even during the day, and, the climate is changing, and just, the vibe is that, civilization is, too old and it's falling apart. And the story is about someone who is kind of, through, a weird fantasy plot, kind of backs into fixing the sun, which is also, a religious journey. Anyway, the trilogy that I've been reading to Ben, though, is all about the, descendants of a generation ship that was sent out by the empire that existed thousands of years before that, and how they're, trying to colonize this planet, but it's also not going very well there, even though they have a working sun, which is, a big deal. I guess the overall, vibes are, it's all about, this one guy who is going on a quest to go try to find, this leader that he knew when he was younger, but who's disappeared, because he wants to bring him to these planet colonies to, make things suck less there. He, too, is on basically a religious journey where he essentially has to turn into the leader that he's looking for, and figure out what the fuck, this human culture that was on a ship for 300 years and then landed on a planet, when all of the systems that kept their ship running were basically running down. What are they gonna do? Are they gonna actually succeed in, making civilization on this planet? Is that even really a thing they should do? What is their relationship to the empire that existed either hundreds or thousands of years ago, which they now have veneration for, but also barely remember in a historical sense. So yeah, it's also it's very, Gene Wolfe was a very weird guy, a big crank, and also extremely Catholic. So the books are all kind of about that. There's definitely multiple moments, especially in this trilogy, which you can kind of tell this is not his best work, where it's he was writing this later in his life. He was maybe getting a little more heavy-handed. So there are multiple moments where the protagonist, Horn, just kind of turns to camera and does a theological debate. It's here's what I think about aniconacism. Here's what it means if God tells you that he doesn't want you to do pictures of him. And that's just the shit that Ben and I eat up, which you'll know if you listen to our Moby Dick podcast, so it's been a lot of fun.
Moby Dick podcast? Where is that?
Oh, that's, my Moby Dick podcast is called Higgledy-Piggledy Whale Statements, and it's on the Abnormal Mapping Network. And, yeah, it's basically like this podcast, except just one book. And the book is about whales instead of magic systems.
It's also like literature.
I mean,
it has literary value.
Sure. Yes, but...
I love when my cranks are very Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
Was C.S. Lewis Catholic, or was he like...
No, yeah, he was Catholic.
No.
Okay.
What?
C.S.
I thought
Lewis...
he was Protestant.
No, C.S. Lewis was Catholic. I'm pretty
I
sure.
remember him being either very Protestant or very Catholic and having feelings about whichever one he was not.
Okay, yeah, this is... I mean, now I'm having like a... I felt so certain that he was Catholic, but the fact that you two aren't positive is making me think that maybe I'm wrong.
I don't know a damn thing about C.S. Lewis, so I will Google here, C.S. Lewis Catholic. My phone autocorrected to V.S. Lewis.
Oh, wait, you know what I think he might be? I think he might be fucking C of E. That would explain why I'm confused, because that's the most Catholic you can be while being Protestant.
It says baptized in the Church of England, but returned to Anglicanism at the age of 32. I don't know what the fuck that means.
Yeah, Anglicanism is the Church of England, C of E. That's what I was talking about.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I understand why you would get it mixed up and think he was Catholic then.
Yeah.
I don't know shit about shit.
Yeah, it's like the Church of England is like, it started as the official state church that was founded, during the Reformation. And because, okay, this is like probably super simplified, and anyone who actually is a historian of this would like shake me by the collar. But as far as I can tell, basically because the king was defecting from the Catholic Church for political reasons, so that he could annul his marriage, and not really because he had any theological issues, the Church of England has always been like pretty similar to the Catholic Church in terms of its vibe, as opposed to...
That is my understanding as well, yeah.
As opposed to like a Lutheran sect where like Luther had lots of problems that he like
95 of.
Exactly.
You know what? Luther really nailed it.
God damn it.
Fuck you. Fuck off.
I've also been reading some stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I've been, obviously, as I said last time, I've been reading Gundam. I don't know what the first book... This is like a book, but it's also technically 3 books in one, but it doesn't refer to them as a trilogy, just as like books inside a book, but they all have titles, so I assume they must have been published separately at some point.
So it's the same thing as Fellowship of the Ring?
No. If Fellowship of the Ring had, like, Awakening, and then it was whatever the next one is. Like, this is Gundam Awakening, but the book... The book cover just says Mobile Suit Gundam Awakening, Retribution, whatever the titles are. Okay. It doesn't say the Mobile Suit Gundam Trilogy.
Well, yeah, but Fellowship of the Ring has a part in it where it says Book 2.
I know.
Okay.
That's not what this is.
Okay.
It's fine. The book is fine. I don't know that Tomono's a fantastic author.
Mm-hmm.
This is a very dry read.
That does not surprise me.
It's a lot of, like, saying that something happened rather than showing a scene where that happened.
That doesn't surprise me either.
There's also references to other scenes that could have been scenes, but weren't scenes.
That seems very much like a way that you write if you are used to writing for TV.
Mm-hmm.
What I mean is that, like, scenes that could have been scenes but weren't there, like, no reason to do that in a novel, but it makes sense why that would happen in a TV show, right?
Mm-hmm. It's like, the narrator just says, Char had run several tests, like, with the combat data of the mobile suits or something like that. He'd run several simulations before doing this, and it's like, okay, well that could have been a scene that happened, but instead you're referring to it as it's already happened, right in the moment where it becomes relevant.
Right. And this is also how he writes the shows.
It's also a very omnipotent narrator. Omniscient.
Omnipotent.
I want a book with an omnipotent narrator. The narrator is just like, I don't like what these assholes are doing. I'm gonna make them stop.
That's the book I tried to write as a teenager.
I think that's Infinite Jest.
It's
The real Infinite Jest is reading Infinite Jest.
my college roommate for a while was like very into Infinite Jest, which like left me with. On the one hand, I had that kind of like, oh fuck Infinite Jest feeling that so many other people have, but I was also like, oh, but I don't hate my roommate.
I just hate my roommate's attitude about Infinite Jest.
I mean, I don't hate my high school friend who loves House of Leaves.
Nah.
Shrug.
Sure.
Finding out that some of my friends don't like House of Leaves has really, like, freed me from...
I don't like House of Leaves.
Have you read it?
I tried.
Okay.
Does that count?
Well, finding out some of my friends have, like, read the whole book and don't like it has, like, really freed me in my brain, because I was like, someday I'll read it, and then just finding out some of my friends don't like it, I'm like, oh, I guess I don't have to.
It's longer on the inside than it looks.
Mm-hmm.
Which is both a joke and true, because the experience of reading it feels like time dilation.
I feel like...
Anyway. Sorry.
No, it's all good.
I have also been reading another Brandon Sanderson book.
Hey, that's cheating.
Well, it's not Cosmere, so it's not... Well, I don't know. Maybe we'll talk about some other Sandersons on this podcast someday.
Maybe.
We'll read The Wheel of Time, but only the two that Sanderson worked on.
You're gonna have to get someone else for that. I'm not touching the Wheel of Time.
I think we talked about this last time.
Yeah, we did. We talked about, like, my college experience with people reading the Wheel of Time, and me just being like, why?
I've been reading Skyward, which is Brandon's recent foray into YA books. Which I don't know that he's done YA since Mistborn, I guess. He does younger aimed books, but I don't know that they're YA. I feel like they're younger than YA.
Yeah, I feel like he does some, like, kids' books.
The Reckoner stuff might be YA. I don't know anything about that.
I don't know anything about that Reckoner series.
I think
the
it's a
covers look
superhero.
like YA.
I think it's a superhero thing.
Okay.
It's interesting to see Brandon, like, say his politics out loud to such a degree.
Oh?
Uh-huh. What does he want to teach the kids?
I don't know yet, but basically there's people, they live underground, they crashed on a planet, their ship crashed like 70 years ago on the planet, they live on the planet. There's 3 layers of space debris surrounding the planet, like shields, basically. And the prologue is the main character as a little girl learning about space and the aliens that come and attack them whenever there's too many of them in one place, because they can sense when large gatherings happen, which means anytime that the population gets too big, the aliens fly in and start bombing.
Mm-hmm.
Which feels like that's just going to be revealed to be the government of the place that they live.
Yeah.
And not aliens at all.
That does seem like what would happen.
Also, her dad wanted someday we'll all live in one city, and we'll make one nation and one, like, civilization on this rock.
Oh, the Earth
Together.
Federation.
One nation. Under God, I mean the stars. So I'm interested to see where it goes. It skips forward after the prologue, and that city exists where everyone lives together, and it's very City of Ember so far, because literally the first scene has been her in school getting a lecture from somebody saying, hey, you should pick us to come work for. We're the janitor corps. You should come work and do this, because our job's the most important. And then she's like, yeah, that's what the sewer workers said last week, and the chef's guild the week before that. Everyone says that their work is the most important. I want to be a pilot, though. I don't want to do labor. I want to be a warrior. And it's a weird scene where her Grandma tells her stories about, who do you want to hear about this week? Is it Beowulf? I'll tell you about Beowulf. He was your ancestor, you know. And then,
Okay.
no. And then she's like, well, you know what Sun Tzu said? Well, he was your ancestor, you know.
Okay.
I mean, I kind of respect this grandmother. Like, I love telling lies to children.
And then she also said that... Who else was it? Some other figure that I can't remember the name of, and the mom was like, Beowulf was Danish, and Sun Tzu was Chinese. They can't both be her ancestor? And the grandma was like, all the great warriors of Earth are our ancestors, and we carry their legacy.
I love Gundam.
I mean, to be fair to the grandmother, it's one of those things where, like, if you go back far enough in human history, everyone is related to everyone else, right?
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, it's not implausible that this kid is somehow, like, genetically related to both of those people, but, like, not in a way that means anything.
Right, and it's like, at first I thought this was Brandon just like, I'm going to tell you that this character is, like, Chinese.
Mm-hmm.
And by not saying China because it's in space and there's no China.
Mm-hmm.
But it's actually just, this grandma's philosophy is that all of the great warriors of Earth are our ancestors because we carry their spirit with us, and we're like, you know, we carry their legacy with us. And so I don't think it's that at all.
Yeah.
I hope that, much like City of Ember, this book takes a bizarre religious turn. A fucking inscrutable religious turn. I
don't remember that being inscrutable. I remember it being a very, like, we just need to stop having war and be peaceful together.
But there's something that gets, like, deeply religious in the City of Ember books that I can't remember because
I know that there's aliens.
I remember that I did not like the second book, and then I really didn't like the first couple chapters of the third book.
The second book is where they go to a village, and it's like, we have to work out our differences and be peaceful people, because if we have conflict, we will become just like the old people, the old humans who, like, burned the world with their world wars. But we can't do that. We can't be like them. We have to be nice as individuals so that state violence doesn't happen. Or something like that. Anyway, I'm interested to see where this space book goes. She doesn't have a spaceship yet, but I think she will soon. It's on the cover.
I love that for her.
You good?
Yeah, I'm just spilling coffee on my chin. It's fine. I was hoping you wouldn't draw attention to that on the podcast, but it's fine.
You got two big drops on the underside of your chin.
Shut the fuck up.
This is a video podcast now.
Vodcast. Anyway, we watched Elantris episodes 4 through 6.
We did now.
Fucking love the Elantris eye catch.
Yeah, the OP for Elantris is really good.
What is the Elantris eye catch? It's like a person turning into... It's like a person experiencing the Sheod, right?
Yeah.
Like
I think it changes, like, the first half is one character and the second half is a different character.
Yeah, I could see that.
Maybe the first one is Hrathen drawing the logo of the show with his finger.
That'd be pretty sick.
It would probably just be something cute that a Sion was doing, right? It would probably just be...
Oh, because that's the Haro,
like,
yeah.
Yeah, that's the Haro.
I can't believe we have dead Haros in this book.
Sion's hanging out with dogs.
A dog slowly climbing a giant Sion over the course of many eye catches of like 6 episodes. Who wants to talk about Hrathen?
I'll talk about Brayden. I talked about Brayden last week. I'm going to hastily pull up the Elantris summaries that we were reading last time to just refresh my memory. There we go. Right, so this chapter is a lot of exposition. The novel still really hasn't started for Hrathen, I feel like. Hrathen and Galadon are walking around Elantris, and Galadon is explaining, like, okay, there are 3 main gangs. Autumn can't remember. So, one gang is Karada's people, one gang is led by Sheor, and the final gang is led by Eandon. I am trying to remember which one is which in this summary. Is not being tremendously helpful.
Eandon is in the university.
Right, Eandon is in the university. He has some power because he discovered that there was something edible in the books. Vellum. Now they're out of it, and so he is like. It feels like maybe something is going to happen. He's going to make a move to get some more power somehow because, he doesn't have access to food anymore. I believe he is jealous of whichever gang has control of the palace because Karada, like he believes like controlling the palace of Elantris would give him more authority.
He's also
You go.
He's the one who's like claiming to have been a noble on the outside. So I think that's also why he wants the palace, because he's like, oh, I'm the king of Elantris now.
Right, and Hrathen is like, I don't know that name, so either he changed his name when he got here, or he was not a noble. So that'll be a little interesting mystery that we will untangle as the book goes on, I assume.
Or as Olivia says, one of Brandon's little mysteries.
So he wants the palace. Which one is guarding the palace? Karada.
Like I just said.
You did say that. Karada is the one that is trying to get out. Karada was seen near the palace in K. Is
that what it is? Did you confirm that it's K?
I can't remember.
You listen to that. You're the only one who listens to the audiobook.
I know. And it was presumed to have been trying to assassinate the king. Hrathen thinks
she said she wanted to.
That's what she said. Yes, and Hrathen was like, I don't know. That seems like, what's her motive there? Like, what does she get out of assassinating?
Tall order.
The king?
I used to live there.
Yeah. And so he is skeptical of what she is telling people she was doing.
It just makes no sense that somebody who is like experiencing a tremendous sort of hardship would lash out at the authority figure that enforces the status quo that maintains her hardship.
Right.
Okay.
That doesn't make any sense.
Right.
But to be fair, the king doesn't control the Sheod.
I want to defend Hrathen a little bit here. Like, I do agree that he's, like, not getting the very obvious reasons why someone in her position would want to kill the king. But I don't think he's wrong that, like, she's been able to successfully escape. Why not just, like, run out to the countryside and, like, just fucking vibe? Like,
yeah.
I'm not saying I don't understand the concept of, like, wanting to take bloody revenge and feeling like that matters more than just being able to have a life. But it kind of seems like it's not that hard to escape Elantris, because she's done it multiple times.
It's mentioned in the next chapter, I think. That
in chapter 6, I think.
Okay. That there aren't enough people to actually patrol the walls because, like, that's not really needed.
Yeah.
And they just have big sticks that I assume they just use to knock people off the walls.
Like,
yeah.
Honestly, it does, like, it's that, along with, like, other things in this chapter, makes me think that, like, the reason all these people are in Elantris is more than just, like, Eadin decided to put them there, you know? Like, that there's some kind of weird magic thing that makes that the case somehow. I have no idea. That's just kind of a
Yeah,
shot
It
in the dark.
also
That makes sense to me.
It also says that things deteriorate faster than normal inside the city.
Yeah.
Like materially.
Yeah.
So that's definitely there's some. I also there's something about location that is important to Elantris. It's like a thing I know vaguely. I think I read somewhere that, like, not to like zoom out too far into the Cosmere stuff, but as far as I'm aware, Elantris stuff doesn't work outside of Elantris zone.
Okay.
Wait, does the magic... Wait a minute. Is the normal...
Like the
Sorry,
glyph stuff doesn't work off of Aeon? Is that the planet?
I have no idea.
Wait, does...
I'm just trying to summarize this chapter, my dude.
That's just amazing to me that normally Brandon's magic does work if you leave the world. Like, that actually surprises me a lot. Anyway.
You can cut this later, I guess.
No, it's fine. It's fine. The other thing that we learn about Karada, we learn a lot about Karada, which makes me think she's going to be a principal character in the novel. The thing that we learn about her is that she's very merciful. When a new person enters the city, they can either like turn right, turn left, or go forward. And if you like, that's how the gangs have kind of split up the food that comes into the city. Like, we don't mess with each other's like people, and so like if you walk into what is Karada's territory, she just like gently threatens you and takes your food. Whereas if you walk into like Sheor's territory, Sheor's main characteristic that Galadon exposits here is that Sheor is like brutal, like will just beat the hell out of you just because she wants to.
Sheor is the Joker.
Yeah, Sheor is the Joker. We don't get a ton more about Sheor here, I don't think. Nothing I can remember off the top of my head.
I do think it's worth mentioning that even, like, Sheor and his gang, who are kind of, like, violent for no reason, still won't get into a fight that they think... where they think the other person has, like, any chance of fighting back, because they're that scared of even, like, a tiny injury.
Right, because Galadon is like, well, when you came into the city, Hrathen, you had wandered into Sheor's territory, but, like, they just, like, threatened you, because they thought, like, you know, even if you had just, like, gotten in one good punch and, like, you know, knocked out a tooth or something, like, that causes a problem for these people, you know? And so even these, like, very brutal people are very cautious. Something else that, like, Hrathen remarks on in this chapter is that, like, Galadon, like, walks through the city very slowly and is, like, always, like, looking where he sets his feet, making sure not to, like, step on something, making sure not to stub his toe. And it seems like this is how a lot of people move through Elantris, is just, like, very slowly, very cautiously, because you can't really risk just, like, you know, hitting your funny bone on a door or something.
And it's also, like, everything's fucking covered in slime. So it's
yeah,
probably...
and also everything is covered in slime.
It's probably very easy to, like, just slip and do a pratfall.
Ooh,
yeah.
You don't want to do a pratfall?
No!
You do not want to slip on the slime banana peels in Elantris. And so, Galadon does all this exposition, and Hrathen's like, wow, you're so wise, you know so much about Elantris. And he asks, like, how long have you been here? And Galadon is like, 6 months, maybe? I don't know. And it hits Hrathen that, like, oh, people don't last here. Like, being here for 6 months, like, puts you as a person who has, like, a lot of wisdom to share, you know?
It's really, like, it's really fucked up how much the idea of someone who is, like gone in Elantris exists, even though it's impossible to die. Like, you just reach a state of suffering where, like, I guess you're not really there anymore.
Yeah. Like, you're not... In some ways, like, you're not human anymore. You are just suffering. Which that's not me saying it, that's just... I'm not saying that these people are less than human because they are suffering. I'm saying, like, that's kind of how the book characterizes, like, the way that these people are. Is it's just like, yeah, like, Hrathen and Galadon are just, like, stepping over people who are just, like, laying in the fetal position, mumbling to themselves and stuff. Like, these people are not described as, like, human in a lot of ways.
Of course, there's a capitalized word for it, the Hoed.
Yes. Which I keep reading as Hoed on the wiki.
I mean, because that is an English word. Hoed is just already a word, Brandon.
There's some Hoed in this house. There's some Hoed in this house. I think I'm very funny.
I know you do.
They simply thought it out too hard, and then their lives became nothing but suffering.
Cognitive realm is the realm of thoughts.
And so finally, like, they are winding down for the night. They are, Hrathen asks Galadon, like, where do you live? And Galadon is very coyly like, I don't know, no one lives in any of these houses. People just sleep places, you know? And Galadon, and Hrathen's like, no, really, but, like, where's the one where you go to sleep?
What he says is Duladel.
Right. He says Duladel.
Which is important for later.
That's where Galadon is from, right?
Yes, he's a doula.
Yes, and...
So Duladel, which we'll talk about in a moment.
Yes, and then, Hrathen's like, okay, but, like, where is the place that you have, like, kind of made your home here in Elantris? And Galadon goes and shows him, like, the place where he lives, and it's like, there's a lot of books on the walls.
It's a wine cellar. It's very dry.
It's a wine cellar. It's very dry.
I'm gonna repeat what I said.
No, I'm. It's how I'm collecting my thoughts. And Hrathen is like, oh my gosh, you have books from Elantris. These are valuable. Like, like the collected wisdom of, like, the people that we considered gods for centuries. Like, some of it is here in this wine cellar where you live. And I don't remember what the conversation that sets this up is, but, like, Hrathen is like, says something about the magic that the Elantrians used to do, and Galadon is like, oh yeah, I can do some of that magic, and writes one of these glyphs in the air, and kind of, like, smirks at him. He's like, I blew this kid's fucking mind. I fucking rocked his socks.
Now, this is an Aeon.
Mm-hmm, an Aeon.
Which is, like, the symbols.
Yeah.
There's one of those inside of the Sion, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So, pointing, gesturing, shrugging.
Yeah.
Magic exists outside of Elantris. Like, we still know that. We know that is still present, just in a different form. Maybe this is the Fabrial equivalent of search finding.
Maybe. I don't know.
That makes sense to people
that
who haven't read Way of Kings.
You are jumping ahead today.
Yeah.
Shut up!
I mean, this is kind of, like, in the next chapter, but we do hear that, like, Seons are very old and, like, are passed down over generations and generations. So it definitely would make sense, I think, if, like, the ancient Elantrians who could use this magic created them, and now no one can make any more.
Yep.
Do we have more remarks about this chapter? I felt like I say, I felt like, oh, the book still hasn't started because he's just doing exposition. Like, there's no conflict introduced in this chapter. It's just explaining what Elantris is.
And also giving you a little, like, hey, magic moment.
Yeah.
I found it kind of, like, I guess funny, that, like, one of the minor exposition details is, like, okay, so everyone in Elantris is, like, desperate for food all the time. That's why the main thing that the gangs have divided up is, like, access to the people who come with offerings of food. And so, like, of course you have to ask, like, are people eating each other? And the answer is no, because
They taste bad.
Yeah, like, because, like, the corpse of, or I guess the flesh, because they can't become a corpse, but the flesh of someone who has this affliction, like, is so bitter that no one can keep it down. And personally, I look at that as Brandon just being like, I don't want cannibalism to be a major thing in this. If I don't do something, it's gonna be, because I did say that all these people are desperately hungry all the time enough to do horrible shit.
Yeah. I'm going to quickly explain this away so that we don't have to worry about it for the rest of the book.
And I honestly do appreciate that because I am spending all my time thinking about cannibalism for my other podcast, so...
I mean, it literally has Hrathen say the line, "It's nice to see that cannibalism has been so logically ruled out as an option."
And I was like, yes, thank you.
Brandon.
I agree.
That's just Brandon poking his head in. So don't ask about this. It's not in the story. But also, this chapter ends with Galadon saying, Galadon chuckled, "Oh, you mean the Chaos Emeralds?" Because he literally just chuckles smugly and draws a glyph in the air with his finger.
I'm always doing
He thinks
this.
he's so fucking slick.
I think Galadon's pretty slick, to be honest. Like,
I like him. Should we chug along to chapter 5?
yeah.
Who wants to talk about Sereni?
I would like to, if that's cool.
Okay. Go for it.
So this chapter starts with Sereni's, at court, at King Eodon's court, and Hrathen shows up, and she's kind of like watching this whole situation and chatting to Ash, like she does, and Sereni mentions that this is, like, Hrathen being here is a really big deal because there are only 20 Gjorns total. And so she's kind of, like, looking at this and being like, oh, damn, like, the Fjordal Empire is making moves, huh? But Eodon kind of doesn't give a shit.
Yeah.
So basically, Hrathen is here to very, like, straightforwardly and without a lot of attempt to convince, tell Eodon to convert to Shu-Dereth. This is his attempt to, I guess, get the low-hanging fruit out of the way, to be like, all right, the easiest way to accomplish my task would be if I can get the king to convert. But he doesn't really, I don't think he's really trying, because I don't think he really thinks it's going to happen, because Eodon pretty much is just like, no, I already have a religion, thanks. It's, like, basically the same as yours, so don't worry about it. Just go out there and, like, do your converting shit, I don't care. Specifically, Eodon believes in Shu-Korath, which he claims worships the same god, so you get the sense that there's some kind of, history of one or the other of these breaking off of the other one, probably. And,
the parent religion is Shu-Keswick.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not entirely clear to me. The idea of, I question Brandon's historical writing here a little bit here, because I think the idea of, like, a religious split where neither side is claiming to be the original one is kind of weird. Is there a third group somewhere who's like, no, we're just the original shit?
Well, and also, I want a better insight into what the split is. I'm sure it's coming, but I really would have appreciated it in this chapter where they're already talking about it so much.
Yeah.
I get the feeling, because Hrathen says something about, like, so-and-so is the true form of our god. And so I think Hrathen's sect believes that, like, their Wyrn, their god king, is like a physical incarnation of God, and whatever Eodon's sect does not believe that. But I want to know, like, when did that show up? Like, when did someone decide this guy is God?
Yeah, it's also part of this. Also, another element in this chapter where I was like, boy, like, I'm getting some exposition, but I need so much more. Is that Eodon says Fjorden hasn't held any real influence for 2 centuries, and Hrathen counters Fjorden is more powerful now than it ever was before. And I think that what's going on here is that Fjorden, like, was doing a lot of active military conquering about 2 centuries ago, but isn't doing that right now. But they are setting up to do it in 3 months. And
because they just did it. They just did it in Duladil.
Right, and Hrathen is completely playing their hand here by saying Fjorden is more powerful now. Like, I think maybe we're meant to understand that as something of a reference to, like, spiritual power as well, and, like, the way that Serene reflects on this later in the chapter suggests that. But, like, yeah, like, I really would like to know, like, what war has Fjorden been prosecuting over the past, like, 10 years? And why doesn't Iadon see them as a threat? I think, though, that really Iadon is just a fucking dumbass.
He really feels like one.
Like, it's just, like, there is literally a bit where Ash is just like, oh, Iadon isn't really a politician, he's just a merchant. Which plays into the, I guess, the political history of Kai, which is, like, interesting and stuff, but it is kind of like, how dumb can Iadon possibly be and have held power for 10 years? I mean, really.
Right.
Anyway,
well, I guess he doesn't have to be smart if he has all the swords.
Right, but how did he get all the swords, like, in the Elantrian Revolution, or whatever? Anyway, okay, so...
We'll get there in just a moment.
Yes. So Iadon basically dismisses Hrathen and tells him to get out, and Hrathen does. And Serene is kind of chit-chatting about this with Ash, and they're both kind of like, wow, Iadon's such an idiot. And Serene kind of decides, like, that it will be fun to, like, intellectually fence with Hrathen, basically.
Right.
I will debate him.
Yes, absolutely, she's going to debate him. And like, you know, it's because she recognizes that he's genuinely dangerous. It is interesting that she looks at him as, like, the discussion that she has with Ash, she's like, the Wyrns are more powerful now than they were centuries ago. And Ash says, it's hard to look past military might. So it sounds like she sees the Wyrns as having a lot of, like, soft power, like, presumably through their religion, that isn't necessarily reflected in, like, standing armies that Iadon would be aware of. Something like that. There is, like, a... There's some kind of line about, like... not finding it, but anyway, some kind of line about how, like, an army of priests could be more dangerous than an army of soldiers, which is, like, a very, like, hey guys, do you get it? Like, cultural imperialism is also a thing. Anyway, so while she's in the middle of, oh, right, one, like, good bit here is that, like, Serene kind of is deciding, like, yeah, okay, I'm gonna try to fight this Hrathen guy and, like, not let him get what he wants. And Ash is like, oh, okay, so you're supporting Iadon even though you hate him? And she's like, I mean, yeah, like, I guess he is my king. And also, like, you know, this alliance, whatever, I don't want. Like, ultimately, you know, it's bad for her people if Fjordell increases its power. But it is kind of interesting to me that Serene is clearly, like, a political actor, but she has, like, no ideology or, like, cause. She's literally just like, well, I've been dropped in a court. I guess I'll pick a thing to defend.
Well, what she says is anything is better than Fjordell rule.
Right.
Which, that's like the core basis of an ideology is, what don't I want?
Yeah, and, you know, also immediately after she sort of says this, where she's like, okay, yeah, Iadon sucks, but I'd rather live under him than Fjordell, then he, like, sexistly tells her to go away.
Yes.
And she puts on her, like, timid maiden act.
Oh my god, okay, I'm actually so mad about this one line. So
this is so terrible.
So what happens is he's like, women aren't supposed to be in court, and she's like, oh, no one told me that. And, you know, so I just wanted to see the pictures. And so then, she's able to, like, leave without him suspecting that she was doing anything. And Ash is like, Ash is kind of like being like, what the hell is that? Why are you acting like such a feminine stereotype? And I just really want to call bullshit on that. A stereotype, the word stereotype comes from, like, early, like, printing, like, photography. It is not a word it makes any goddamn sense for Ash to say. Let alone the idea that, like, the concept of, like, stereotypes as, like, ways that people behave that accord to, like, how people expect them to be. Like, I think that meaning of the word is much, much more recent and has to do with, like, fucking political thought of the 20th century. So, yeah, I call full bullshit on this.
Well, and it's also just terrible writing because it's just, well, I don't think you're acting in character.
Well, he says, I just never thought I'd see the day when you, of all women, gave in to a feminine stereotype, even if it was just an act.
And Brandon cannot stop himself from writing, she's a strong woman, not like other women you might see in other books. She's a strong one. She's smart. And she's a politician.
It's also so fucking laughable to me that Ash has never seen her do this before. Like, she jumped to this immediately. Surely this is not the first time she's, like, batted her lashes at someone to make them go away and stop bothering her. Like, that's actually a very,
it's a very common thing.
Yeah, like, I'm not trying to say that, I do this constantly, but as far as cheap tricks as a, like, girl, that's like the first one. It's the first one you learn in girl school. So, like,
I do that to get Autumn to bring me shit all the time.
I do that at work.
Yeah, so, like, it has a little bit of the vibe that I think, I think this is maybe reflecting the fact that this is, like, a very early novel. You do kind of feel like Sereni maybe started to exist at the beginning of this book,
This is also, I will note here, where I started to really notice that the audiobook narrator is very much doing a, like, sassy gay voice for what's the Sion's name?
Ash.
For Ash. Like, I asked you two about it, and you two were like, it's not really in the novel, but, like, the audiobook narrator is introducing this, like, queerness to the way that he voices Ash that is, like, okay, there's some layers to having the sassy gay best friend that is also not really, like, an actor in the novel.
Yeah, this is something that I was thinking about, is that, like, Ash definitely has a lot of opinions, like, Ash literally is the one who says, oh, Eodon's just a merchant, he's not a politician. So, like, it's not as though Ash is just, like, sort of a robot who only says, like, the objective truth or whatever. But, on the other hand, that's also obviously Sereni's opinion. So, the note that I wrote is Ash going to be, like, an actual character?
For a thing that has existed for 2,000 years or whatever, and, like, been, I guess, the possession of generations of people, he doesn't really seem to, like, look through the lines of what's happening. He doesn't point out, oh, you like, archetype of nobles are all doing this, and, like, you're just doing this because of this, or, like, seeing through her at all. He's really just, like,
taking everything at face value.
Which, like, maybe if they are robots in the sense of, like, they can't process new ideas, then every time he encounters a person like this, he doesn't, like, internalize how they act. But it does also feel like he is not old at all, or has any experience.
Mm-hmm.
There's, like, this shows up later in, like, Stormlight with Syl, but there it's like she literally didn't exist before the book.
Right.
In a way. Like, Ash also feels like he was conjured for this story in the world, because, like, despite being centuries old, he doesn't, like, have any input or perspective that
paints him as differently than just the AI servant that goes along with the princess.
Mm-hmm.
For what it's worth, I think... I can't find any examples now, right? Sorry, but I think that this book actually genders Sions with it. Not that...
It's unclear to me because Ash is definitely gendered with he, him pronouns a couple times, but then I don't know...
I swear to... Okay, that's cool.
We had this talk last time and we came to a different conclusion.
I think both it and he have been used for... like, I think it is a kind of a general Sion thing, whereas like Ash specifically is he, maybe?
Okay, I can believe that.
I'm just looking at these 2 pages at least, and it seems like
there are no pronouns being used.
Yeah, that's the thing.
It seems like Brandon is writing Ash every time.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's...
Okay.
I mean, the vibe that I'm getting is that this is a cis person writing a genderless robot. But yeah. Anyway,
Anyway, we need to go to Hunky K.
Right, yes. So she's, like, leaving court, and she's suddenly... Somebody, like, calls out her childhood nickname, Amy, and, like, a huge guy shows up and gives her a bear hug, and she's like, what the fuck is happening? And then, like, partway through the hug, she realizes that it's her Hunky K, or her Uncle Keen. And it turns out this is, like, her father's younger brother, who she remembers as, like, kind of a, like, confirmed bachelor and, like, traitor, and, like, he used to always go on trips and come back with cool presents for her, and she loved him, but she hasn't seen him in years, because, apparently, he's settled down in Kai, and he's married and has, like, 5 kids. And this whole thing is all very shocking to her because she didn't know about any of this, pretty much. And she's like, wow, I'm sure my dad would be surprised that you're living in Erelon. And he's like, no, he knows. So there's something here where, like, there's been some kind of, like, falling out between Serene's father and her uncle that they have been hiding from her. But she doesn't really have much time to, like, think that through, because he invites her to his place for dinner.
he says, you need to meet the monster of a woman who finally managed to capture your uncle. And then the next sentence after the page break is, Kian's wife was hardly a monster. In fact, she was one of the most beautiful, mature women Serene had ever seen, because Brandon fucking loves MILFs.
Brandon loves MILFs, and Brandon loves accidentally writing women loving MILFs.
I wrote this in my notes. Ringing the Serene is gay for her aunt alarm. But then like a few paragraphs later, she meets all her cousins, all of Keen's kids, and she also thinks one of her male cousins is hot. So, Serene.
We love the strong female accidental bisexual in a Brandon Sanderson novel.
So we should talk about sort of the big thing here in this section, which is
what is it? What is the phrasing here?
The cousin whose mind is broken.
Oh, fuck. Oh, I hate that.
Yeah.
So bad. There's one of the cousins in the family is like so he has like a bunch of kids who seem to range in age from like, well, okay, some of them are not actually his biological kids. They're like his wife's kids from the previous marriage. Anyway, they range in age from like a little girl who's about 10 to like adult children. But one of them is like not making eye contact with people and repeating numbers, and like everyone ignores it when he says stuff, and it's just like, oh, great.
The littlest sister,
Kaisi?
Kais. Yeah.
Says, Adian is always sleeping. I think it's because his mind is only half awake.
And like it's rude, but it's not like it's not true, I guess, in this context. Not to say that I think that's, like, a thing that can actually be true of a person. I just mean, like, that's what the book is saying, you know?
Then, 2 pages later, we have Sereni's version of it, which is in the narration. Which is, Sereni had met people like him before, children whose minds weren't completely whole.
It just sucks ass.
So, Brandon fucking sucks at writing anything about, like, the mind. And how it works or doesn't work in certain contexts. And, like, this is just going to be a thing that we're going to have to sit with for all of his books.
I guess we've basically already had, like, a certain kind of, like, fucked up portrayal of neurodivergence in the sense of, like, that's what all the people who've, like, succumbed to the pain are like. But this is, like, much more, that's, like, a horrific fantasy thing that is still, like, implying some kind of fucked up things about, you know, like, chronic pain and mental illness, I guess. But this is literally just like, oh, I put an autistic child stereotype in my novel.
Right, like the Sheo doesn't exist, and the conditions that those people are experiencing cannot actually, like, be represented or recreated in the real world. Because I don't think that's how nerves work.
No.
So, that's, like, iffy, but at least he has, like, the foundation of magic bullshit. At least he has that at the core. This is just straight up, like he said, autistic child stereotyping.
Yeah.
He just talks about, how many steps it is from Sworden to Erelon.
Yeah.
And is just counting in his head, which is, like, obvious.
It's also, this dinner, in addition to being a chance for some, like, unpleasant stepping in it, in terms of, like, coding, and also it's very clearly just kind of like, oh, look at this fun big family, look at this nice dad who's, like, cute and cooks and stuff. It's also an opportunity for a little bit of exposition about the politics and the history of, Erelon and Kai and Elantris, and it turns out it's some wild shit. It turns out that 10 years ago, you know, when the fucking the thing
when Elantris fell.
Exactly. Like, that day, all the servants in the city, like, turned against their masters and did a revolution. And there was, like, riots and chaos and stuff. And then the ultimate outcome of that was that the merchant class took power, and that's who Eodon is. And that's why, I guess, we're meant to believe that he's, like, so bad at being a king, I guess. And that's also why Keen's family doesn't have any servants. So, like, he does all the cooking. And, like, it's a very weird thing to me because I feel as though we're maybe meant to look at that as kind of, like, morally admirable, or at least, like, just very sweet and homey, you know? But the reason they don't have servants is because 10 years ago the servants killed their masters and they don't want that to happen to them.
And also, Brandon doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. This is what the book says. It was the servants who started the revolution. The very day their masters fell, the servants turned on them. Some, mostly the country's current nobility, say it was because the lower class in Elantris was treated too well, that their pampered natures inspired them to cast down their former rulers at the first sign of weakness.
Well, okay, I do want to be fair to Brandon and say, like, this is, first of all, Keen is saying this, and second of all, Keen is saying other people say this, and they might be wrong. Like, I don't think we're meant to believe that, like, revolution is what happens if you're too nice to your lower classes. But I also think that, like, in a weird way, like, okay, what happened in Elantris, or what happened in Elantris and Kai 10 years ago was basically a bourgeois revolution, right? Like, a hereditary noble class was replaced with the leadership of the bourgeois class became the ruling class and, like, destroyed the old nobility. And now you have a situation where, like, there's still an underclass, but everything is kind of unstable. And, like, you know, that has happened in history, right? Like, that's how capitalism began, kind of. But there are all kinds of things about the specifics of this that are very, very weird.
Yeah.
Oh, I also love that along with, like, saying, oh, you know, we don't use servants, Keen kind of specifies, like, oh, we make our kids do all the work.
Yeah.
Which is just, like, oof.
Mm-hmm.
It's just very, it feels very, like, big homeschool family.
Yeah.
To me.
We are absolutely, I think, meant to think that, I mean, okay, I'm not trying to take some kind of strict children should not do chores ever standpoint here, but, like, it's not just about chores, right? They literally run a fucking castle. So, like, if they're making their children do all the work, that's a lot of child labor. But, like, the vibe is literally just, like, everyone's laughing about it, and it's like, oh, the kids have to scrub the floors. Isn't that a nice thing for nobles to have to do sometimes, huh?
Yeah, it's far beyond, oh yeah, we make our kids take out the trash and we give them $1 every time they do it or something.
I mean, I think that we're meant to believe that it is like that, but, like, I don't believe Brandon because they have a castle, and it takes more work than that to run a castle.
They have a mansion.
Oh, forgive us.
I believe the summary refers to it as a castle-like home.
Oh. Also, we have a little more world building. A couple of little details, like, Serene says, "Oh, you're Fjorden?" And the wife says, "No, I'm from Sword. I'm Swordish."
Yes.
Sworden, which is, like, definitely, like, a place that was like conquered by Fjordell, but has its own identity.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
We also get fantasy chopsticks as a gag.
Yeah.
Which aren't actually chopsticks, but they're like some sort of implement that is vaguely designed that Serene doesn't know how to use to eat the food, because it's Mypon food, which we know from Emperor's Soul, like the afterword, Emperor's Soul. Like, this is the area of this world that is, like, Fantasy Asia.
Yes.
I kind of got the sense that, like, what was happening here is it's like, oh, this is fantasy Asian food, and my fantasy white people don't know how to use the fantasy Asian utensils. But the fantasy Asian utensils are actually a knife and fork, and the fantasy white people utensil is a spoon. Get it?
Whoa, my mind is blown.
Anyway, I also think it's very, very, very funny that the name of the Fantasy Asia place is Mypon. It has camel case in it, by which I mean there's a capital letter in the middle of a word. That's just such a...
Oh, no.
There's...
Oh, you didn't know because you have...
Oh my god, yeah,
oh,
no.
no.
Sorry to tell you, there's camel case in this book, which is... I mean, on some level, I hate it and it sucks, but on some level, I deeply respect the balls that it takes to put that in your first book.
Because it's also the name of the food, which is Haiko, has like the capital K.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff about Keen has, like, traveled the world more than anyone else, and so he, like, knows all these exotic dishes to make, and there's a lot made of, like, how exotic his tastes are because he goes to the exotic place, and it's, like, really hammering home, oh, I know about all the different people.
Yeah.
And also, Mypon food is very greasy.
Oh.
If half of it doesn't end up on the floor, you're not eating it right.
That was... Oh my god. That's such a fucking sucks ass. I mean, that is what, like, white people who are cooking Chinese food say. Like,
Yes.
I hate it.
Keen sprinkling MSG on the food and being like, this is an exotic spice.
God. One thing that I just noticed, like, now, like, I didn't notice this when I was reading the chapters, but in chapter 4, there's a little bit where Hrathen is kind of, like, reflecting on his, like, social life outside, and he's like, damn, I wonder, are my friends gonna still keep having their clandestine meetings? I didn't even get to meet my friend's new wife. And he mentions Keen. So Hrathen and Keen are friends, or were friends, I guess.
All right.
And I
I missed that detail. I remember this conversation, but I missed that it was Keen because I didn't have the context for it yet.
Yeah. I also in a way, it's pretty skillful because I think if he introduced Keen as a character before that conversation, you would notice the name a lot more.
Right.
But yeah, I assume that Hrathen and Keen and their buddies were like plotting something political. Like, maybe not literally going to overthrow Eodon, but, like, I feel like that's the logical assumption of, like, some nobles are meeting clandestinely, and Hrathen wonders if they're going to continue, that they were, doing something.
And one of the children in this family, Luco, is Hrathen's best friend.
Oh, right, yes, that also. So, yeah. It really does. There's also a bit in chapter 4 where Hrathen is like, damn, I never got to meet my wife. Well, that's certainly not going to happen now. And I'm like, I don't know, buddy.
Yeah, he says she would have never come to Kay, and she would have just stayed in Teod, and, like, dramatic irony.
Melodramatic irony.
Yes.
That's Serene.
One last thing I want to touch on is that this chapter ends on Serene saying, I feel so at home and so happy now in this moment. Like, I just feel really happy that I've, like, found my place in this strange city, and, I just feel really accepted in this family, and I'm really glad to have this family. I read a Brandon Sanderson book. Something terrible is going to happen next time. I don't know what yet, but something terrible is going to happen because she has remarked upon the feeling of happiness.
You have to watch out if that sentiment is expressed at the beginning of a scene, not at the end.
Well, I'm not going to spoil things, but I think we got to watch out for Serenity. I'm going to briefly host, turn hosting responsibilities back over to Nora, who is looking shocked and awestruck.
I'm pulling a Garma face.
You never want to be doing that.
So we took a break after the first.
A 5-hour break?
Yeah, we took a 5-hour break.
Just a little break.
After the first 2 chapters. Tilly had stuff, I had stuff. Nora didn't, it's her day off, but
I still worked.
Yeah, you still did stuff. You just didn't have time-sensitive stuff.
I did.
Oh.
I finished and restarted Dishonored 2 for the podcast, and I forgot that I had RushJet today. So we didn't do that.
Well, I apologize. Anyway, and there was a moment where I thought, as I was trying to decide, do I want to say let's take a break, or do I want to try and rush through? I was like, well, maybe we can cover this chapter in 10 minutes and it's fine. And then I remembered, oh right, there's some shit in this one.
Yeah, there's definitely some content.
There's some content, but before we get there, Nora, did you want to tell us about Brandon's Rules of Magic, or do we want to save that for another episode?
I don't know. I didn't know if we want to do it at the end, or...
Yeah, let's do it at the end.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'll turn hosting back over to you. I'm sorry to podcast.
Oh, thank God. So basically, Chapter 6 is another Hrathen chapter. Hrathen takes Delof, his Odiv, the Arteth Delof, around and learns about Elantrians. And sort of gets the scoop on what the public opinion of them is, as well as what Delof's opinion of them is, and decides what he will do to convert people
to Shudareth is begin using Elantrians as sort of a scapegoat for anything, because the thing that can unite people is like common shared hatred. That's the chapter. That's what happens in the chapter. Everything else is details, like they go to the wall and we get more descriptions, kind of like some stuff I said earlier about the guards and the patrols. That's basically what happens, is what I said. And anything that we talk about further is going to be just picking apart what the fuck that's all about.
Yeah.
Because it starts off with, like, him trying to figure out how the fuck to get this guy to talk straight, because Dilof is such a zealot that he only gives, like, like
correct answers?
Yeah, what happened to Elantris? Well, Jaddeth struck them down, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It's very, I found it particularly, like, that element where Dilof is just, like, so, such a religious zealot that he can't even really convey information. I thought that was particularly, like, kind of, I guess, interesting in the discussion of, like, how specifically they're planning on scapegoating the Elantrians. Where, like, it's, Dilof is, like, really, really invested in this idea that the Elantrians never had any kind of magic power, and that it was all fake tricks, and there was, like, never any reason to worship them because they're evil. And Hrathen is like, I mean, yeah, but, like, Satan does exist and has magic power. We can just say that they are inhabited by Satan, which, I mean, in this story, Satan is called Svrakis, and that's the souls of the dead who hate Jaddeth. But, like, it's extremely, like, the same kind of thing that, Christians will say, where it's like, oh yeah, no, like, evil supernatural power totally exists. And then, like, that's just a tool for hating whoever.
Mm-hmm. And he has this exchange at the beginning of the chapter where it's like, yes, obviously Jaddeth struck down Elantris, but sometimes he uses natural processes to bring about his will. A plague will kill Fjordell as well as Araline. Jaddeth would protect his chosen, of course.
Yeah, just kind of dismissing him. Like, this is also, I mentioned where the audiobook narrator was kind of queer coding Ash. He's also Igor-Coding Dilof. He's just doing an Igor voice.
You can't coin the phrase Igor-Coded.
Watch me, I just did.
I will say that is, I feel like that's in the book. Like,
yeah, that is in the book, but he's just like, oh yes, master, I will.
Like,
shut up.
He's so terse and passionate that it's like he's horny for God. Like, actively, physically, presently. Like, there's like an urgency to his speech at the beginning of this chapter that's like, are you like about to just go sicko mode on everybody? What's happening? Like,
I'm really curious. I don't think we got any real hint of this in this chapter. I would be so curious to know, like, what happened in Dilof's life that made him convert to this religion. I don't know. It's possible we're not going to get anything like that, and it's just going to be like, well, he is a zealot. He just is. But, like, I feel like the vibe I'm getting is that, like, something went horribly wrong for him, and this religion was the answer, and that's, like, why he's so invested.
Well, and it's mentioned offhand, like, it's mentioned somewhere that, like, he had converted before really anybody in the city had converted to this faith. Like, he converted before Elantris fell, I think. So, like, he's been this way for a very long time, and I think it very much could go, like, oh, this is just the character, this is just who he is, or, like, chapter 20, like, we'll get some exploration of, like, why is he like this?
We'll have a Dilaf interlude at some point.
I don't know. I definitely understand hating Dilaf because he does like suck, but saying that he's like Igor is now making me sort of imagine him as a funny little guy. Like we just have like a huge dude in armor and a little like kind of guy following him around being a creep, and I like that visually.
I want to point out that my cover of Elantris has Hrathen on it, as played by Nicolas Cage.
Yeah, no, that is Nicolas Cage for sure.
Oh my god.
I think that's Hrathen and Serene, and I think Hrathen is nowhere to be seen on this cover.
Which is very funny.
But yeah, so they go to this wall, and we also get some exposition that I think we touched on in the earlier part about like the exact phrase that's used is that like the force that is protecting the wall is essentially a PR thing as much as a like more than like we are actually guarding Elantris and keeping the Elantrians in Elantris, you know?
Yeah.
And Hrathen remarks about like, oh yeah, if Fjordal's armies come here, like that force is not a problem for them, like not at all.
Yeah.
They also talk about like what we said about the magic being evil, because he's like, well, okay, if the Elantrians didn't have any magic, why are people still transforming into Elantrians today?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's just sort of a quick Twitter own on Dilaf.
I mean, the thing is, like, Dilaf accepts so quickly this. I feel like Dilaf knew that by saying that the Elantrians never had any magic, he was, like, denying obvious reality, you know?
There's, like, this bit at the end where, like, Hrathen, basically starts this idea of the Elantrians being this evil force and realizes that Dilaf has kind of led him there.
Yes. Yeah, I really... I think it's actually very interesting that, like, Hrathen doesn't say to Dilaf, hey, the explanation for the Elantrians is that they are Sfrakis, and they always have been, and that's just what's true. He says that, and then, like, this moment that you just mentioned happened, and then Dilaf is like, yeah, but you don't really believe that, do you? And Hrathen is like, look, that's not the point. This is just what we're going to tell people so we can get them to hate the Elantrians. And it's really, again, like, this is something where I just want to know more about Dilaf, where I'm like, why doesn't he find that perfectly plausible? Like, I guess, obviously, the idea's occurred to him before and he's rejected it for some reason, but, like, why isn't, oh, the people I hate are literally Satan, not... Why is that not perfectly cool with him?
Right.
Yeah. But also, this leads to other questions like, what is this church? What is this belief system?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's more context that I don't...
That we'll get someday.
Yeah.
This book is very weird, I think, just because, like, there is so much exposition happening, but there's still, it feels like, some really obvious gaps, like what we're talking about, like, what is this church's deal? And also, none of this exposition has introduced, like, there is conflict in the world, like, Hrathen, like, needs to convert these people so that, like, they're not militarily conquered. Like, there is conflict in the world, but, like, Hrathen and Serene are not in conflict with one another yet.
And also, like, you know that one... what's the, like, that one, like, literary student guy you knew in high school or early college who was like, actually, Bruce Willis in Die Hard is the antagonist, not the protagonist, because he's trying to stop Snape from doing something, and that makes him the antagonist.
Okay.
Like, from my point of view, Hrathen's the protagonist, right?
Right.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Hrathen's the only one who's acting on things.
Yeah.
Currently.
He's the one with the interesting story going on.
Yeah, this is why, like, my last time reading this, I was so, like, whatever about the Hrathen chapters at the beginning, which I think I only read, like, 9 chapters or so.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, Hrathen is in school right now, learning about the world, whereas Hrathen is actually on a holy quest.
Mm-hmm.
I did also want to talk about Duladel.
Sure.
Because it's mentioned that, like, Hrathen was involved or around for Duladel's, like, destruction,
Mm-hmm.
which was immensely violent and chaotic, and, like, Hrathen doesn't want to do it again,
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
which I feel colors
Yeah, that says a lot about his character.
Galadon.
Okay.
Oh, yeah,
Because
for sure.
Galadon still says, my home is Duladel, even though Duladel doesn't exist.
Right. Okay.
And I don't think it fell in the last 4 months.
Right. Right.
Like, I know that we can mobilize an army to take Kai.
You asked me earlier in the episode. I said I didn't remember. I don't know why
I'm
you're
going to
looking
call it
at me.
Elantris and Greater Elantris. That they can, like, have an army there in 3 months. Yeah, timetables are short in this story, but, like, not that short.
Right.
Yeah.
So I just think that it's an interesting point of character for Galadon that he says that.
I also think it's interesting that Rhéoden knows, Hrathen, like, kind of knows some of the Duladel language, right? Like, he recognizes these, like, words that, that Galadon is always, like, dropping into his speech. But he doesn't say anything about this, which, I mean, you know, obviously when I meet someone and they tell me, like, I'm from that place that got conquered, like, in the last 5 to 10 years, I'm not immediately going to be like, actually, that place doesn't exist anymore. But, like, it is... like, it is interesting that he doesn't even think, oh, this guy's from Duladel? That's not a place that exists.
Yeah, don't you mean, like...
Fjordell?
Yeah.
Yeah, like... It doesn't even occur to Rhéoden that is worth noting.
Yeah.
And it's like... It is weird, because, like, he's a prince. He's, like...
Surely when he was learning this language, he was also being taught about, like, the political history of this nation, because why else would they have taught him that language?
Right, and also, like, he should have been somewhat aware of current events in the last 10 years. Like, I don't know how old Rhéoden is, like, I assume 17.
I was thinking 19, but yeah,
That's
ballpark.
the Sanderson mark.
He's
17 to 19.
Yeah, definitely a teen.
But, like, I would think that he would have some opinion about the people who conquered Duladel. Maybe some recollection of, like, talking to people from Duladel, like, officials.
This is the story that my dad told me.
And I feel like if Elantris was written today, we would have a lot of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We would
Yeah.
like, if Elantris was written by Brandon Sanderson of 2020, the events of these chapters would be like a third of the way through the book.
Mm-hmm.
Because we would set up a whole bunch of shit. We'd have flashbacks to the night of the... what is the word? The Riode?
Mm-hmm.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely does, I think, have the feeling of, like, it's not like I don't want any of this exposition to happen. I just know that he can do it better than this.
Right,
Yeah.
and maybe he couldn't in 2005,
Right, yeah.
but he certainly can now.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm used to newer, like, more practiced novels of his. Like, the thing that I love Sanderson for, among many things, is that, like, I think he's, like, an excellent craftsman of a fantasy novel, and this book is not, like, this book is not it.
It's not blowing my skirt out.
Because, yeah, like, Chapter 6 ends on page 89 in Nora's book, it looks like. I can't tell you what the conflict is. Like, I can tell you what Hrathen's conflict is that he's got to, like, convert this city or there will be, like, a bloodbath.
And Serena's conflict is that she has to match wits with this Giorn or she'll be bored.
Right.
Or the city will be conquered. She understands that's happening. Give her a little bit of credit.
But she doesn't know the timetable. She's like, oh, if the Giorn is here, that means there's probably some shit stirring. I guess I should put that on my to-do list. Yeah.
At some like she knows that this city is on their to-do list.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, no, she definitely has no idea, like, how big of a deal it is. And I also think, like, to some extent, I mean, I'm sure she'd be freaked out if she thought that the Fjordal army was coming in 3 months. But you also definitely do get the sense, I think, that, like, for Serene, like, she really wanted to, like, do some political maneuvering. And, like, by God, she's gonna do it, whether she has to or not.
She shows up in this court and is like, all right, who am I going to do some political maneuvering with? There's a Giorn, all right, gonna go toe-to-toe with the Pope.
It's
Please,
like
a cardinal.
Bishop or a cardinal? I don't know the ranking.
I think a cardinal, because there's only 20 of them, and I think cardinals are more analogous to that.
Cardinals are big wigs in that way.
Also, they dress all in red.
Come?
Maybe that's just all of Shuderith priests, though. I don't know.
You're just Googling Cardinals Catholic Church.
Well, I didn't want to get the St. Louis Cardinals. I don't have a good inkling. I don't have a good lead on how many Cardinals are there.
You could have just Googled how many card.
Do you want me to type?
No.
Just...
How many Cardinals have COVID? That was about the St. Louis Cardinals. 221.
Okay.
There are 200 cardinals in the entire Catholic Church.
Yeah.
Which I have heard is pretty big.
Yeah. Sizable.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that makes sense. Also, red armor.
Yes. Oh, that reminds me of one thing that I thought was kind of funny, is, like, in Chapter 5, when Serene sees Hrathen, she's like, oh, that armor's definitely fake. It's, like, thin metal that would not do any good in battle, because nobody could, like, move as, like, quickly and effectively as this guy does in actual full plate. I hope that she's right and it's just ceremonial armor, because that makes a lot more sense to me. But I wouldn't put it past this book for it to be like, no, Hrathen is just so tough.
The other alternative is, like, it's magic armor.
Well, yeah. That would also make sense.
I'd be curious, like, is this just, like, does Serene have some sort of, like, knowledge of combat? Like, did she get, like, princess martial arts training or something? Like, or does she just look at that and see that it's ceremonial, because Brandon didn't really think about, like, why would this character who...
I mean, I assume that most ruling families have, like, an approximate knowledge of many things.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
I would also imagine that, like, even if she personally has not been taught to fight, because, you know, there would... I find it believable that in this story women aren't supposed to fight, even though, like, there really hasn't been any reason given so far that that would be the case. But, like, it seems like we're just dealing with real-world sexism here, so I think we can assume that that's true. And, like, but even given that, like, it makes sense to me that she would have seen, like, other people in ceremonial armor before, and, like, like, not necessarily that she's had a lot of contact with, like, warriors, but that she's had a lot of contact with, like, important people who wear armor at court, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
I'm sure that a king has ceremonial armor.
Right. And, like,
Yeah.
I can totally see, like, little Serene, like teasing her dad about, like, what a powerful warrior he is, when she knows that the armor that he's wearing is, like, like 2 millimeters thick. That seems like the vibe that they have.
Yeah.
Another thing that we forgot to bring up is that Hrathen mentions...
Oh, I was going to talk about a different thing.
I just wanted to mention that Hrathen and Sereni did not just write letters. We know that they did Skype.
Yes. I think we mentioned that in the last one, because it is briefly mentioned in Sereni's first chapter that she had Skyped with.
Was it?
Yeah.
I thought that was in Hrathen's second chapter.
It's mentioned in hers, and then he also is like, damn, I got to meet my girlfriend on Skype, but I never got to see her IRL. Damn.
You hate to see it.
You hate to see it. Because we're doing a chapter-by-chapter podcast, I was going to bring up what might be called a quibble, but is also feels serious to me about a sentence that Brandon writes here.
Oh, right, yeah.
Which is that, and I don't have the sentence in front of me, but like Hrathen is talking about like his fears about the army coming, and he doesn't want like there to be all this chaos, like you mentioned. He doesn't want it to be like Duladel. But the sentence is something along the lines of, when the armies would come in 3 months and rape the city. And I'm like, hey, Brandon, there are like 8 synonyms for that word you can use, and it really feels like you've picked the edgiest one here because he's the bad guy of the book.
Yeah,
It really kind of made me mad.
I was honestly, so like I know that there's like an updated anniversary edition. And I'm pretty sure that I don't have that version. And
I do.
So I definitely, when I read that line, was like, oh, I assume that's cut in the...
Nope.
But no.
No, I have it right here.
Yeah, that's just like... That sucks.
It sucks. I say, like, you could say pillage, conquer, like, that's 2 off the top of my head, but it just went with, like... It felt to me like, oh, well, I have to establish Hrathen as, like, the antagonist, the villain, the imperialist, the state church guy. So I will choose the, like I will put words in his mouth.
But it doesn't feel right for Hrathen anyway.
Yeah.
He doesn't want this to happen.
Yeah, and there's, like, it's, like...
Honestly...
It's not like he's speaking with disdain for the mechanisms that he's trying to present. Or he's talking with spite for, like, the people of these cities. Like, there's none of that here, so I don't know why he would choose a specifically violent word.
So I have a, like, dumb theory, which is that if you are, like, if you do Latin in high school, you'll encounter the Latin verb that is the root of this word, and it literally just means capture, or, like, loot. And there's about a bazillion things, that, like, historical events or, like, classical motifs that are referred to as, like, the rape of whatever, that are literally just, like, capture. And I find it really, like, I don't know if that's a thing that Brandon ever actually did. But I just find it very believable that he literally wasn't trying to communicate anything with this that you wouldn't be trying to communicate with just the word pillage. Like, I honestly think it's just a bad word choice.
That makes sense.
This could be a little bit like up your own ass with too much classical works and like not thinking, not realizing that this particular word was super like common for things that you were reading when you were writing this, and like not even thinking twice about it.
Yeah. To lighten the mood slightly, this is in that light. It could be similar to when I was 11 and I read The Hobbit, and I was like, you know what? We should start using the word queer to mean weird. I like that.
Yes.
And just not knowing a greater context of the word queer. I was just like, oh, this is a fun word. I like how it sounds. And so just...
That's how I feel. That's how I feel every... Sorry, not to bring it up again, but the Moby Dick is exactly like that. And Moby Dick is also really gay. So it's very funny. Like, he's constantly calling things queer, and it's like, oh, you're right, but you don't know why.
I mean, Fellowship is also that, a little bit. Fellowship is also that.
There's also a part where Hrathen lists the dangers of Arelon outside of Fjordo, which are inept leadership, an overtaxed working class, religious uncertainty, and dwindling resources. All these factors competed to deliver the final blow.
When I was listening to it, I misheard overtaxed working class as overtaxed upper class, so I just totally misunderstood what that line was saying. So I'm glad you read that so that I could be corrected on that.
I feel like even though that like list of problems is very, there's a lot about that where I look at that and I'm like, this isn't real. Like, this is not what a crisis in a city looks like. But I do think that, like, the thing that's going on with Hrathen in this chapter on some level is that, like, he's a fascist, and he's looking at a crisis, and he's like, I can use this to make fascism happen, which, like, is real, you know? It's just...
Yeah, it's how actual fascism works,
you
know?
It's just, like, it's extremely... It is as if, like, every single, like, fascist leader was, like, sitting down in a room and was like, all right, today I think I will do some fascism, and I will do it by scapegoating a group that I actually have nothing against.
I barely understand, and only really learned about today.
Right.
Only saw today. I'd heard of before. And I assume he locks eyes with Raoden. Is that...
I don't know.
Because, like, it mentions that he, like, looks at one of them, and it looks at him, and then the guy runs off. And I assume that that's our only connection between these characters now.
So is Raoden bald now? Are all of the
Galadon is bald.
Yes.
Oh, so it could be. Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, all Elantrians are balding.
Yeah.
Their hair's falling out.
Okay.
I did remember that part. It's mostly that I think it would be, much as I think it's a real, like, power move to put camel case in your first book, I also think it would be a real power move to make, like, the hot male protagonist of your first book bald.
Imagine if Kaladin was bald.
I mean, the hot protagonist of Way of Kings is bald.
From a certain point of view.
Seth is bald.
Yes.
Yeah, but that's late in his career, by which point he's, like, at the height of his power.
I'm putting a bald protagonist in this book. Fuck you.
I can't get over the fucking video that was, like, it was, like, a picture of Seth and someone laughing, and then it cuts to a picture of One Punch Man in white, and he laughs even harder.
But yeah, like, to go back to what Tilly was saying, like, it's literally, Hrathen says to, Deloff, like, I will now show you the tool which not many can use. It is the tool by which, Fjordell is able to conquer nations. And then he's like, yes, the Elantrians. I have decided that I hate them. And it's just so... It also just felt like Brandon was biting off a lot, and we'll see if he's able to chew it.
I don't like that.
Brandon has made himself, like, just a gigantic sandwich full of fascism, and, like...
Right.
And, yeah.
I started to say something, and then I was like, no, I think I finished everything I was thinking about this chapter.
I'm just gonna bring up little details if we keep going.
Yeah. Should we wrap it up? Do you have anything else, Tilly?
No, I'm good.
How would you like to learn about Sanderson's laws of magic?
I mean, that is what we're here for. That is sort of the selling point. There's magic, and it's gonna have laws. Like...
These are creative writing guidelines that can be used to create magic systems for fantasy stories.
Okay.
1. This is Sanderson's first law of magic.
Okay.
An author's ability to solve conflict with magic is directly proportional to how well the reader understands that magic.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually,
Unless you're J.K. Rowling.
that's how I feel about, that is how I feel about, like powers in shows that are mainly about fighting. Like, it's always really frustrating to me when I don't actually understand, what the limits of, like, the capabilities of a mobile suit are, or, like, the powers that a shonen hero has, or whatever. Because it just feels like I can't, build up expectations for what will happen, except in, like, a purely impressionistic way, which is, like, fine, but it's fun for me to actually know, like, this person is powerful at range, and this one's good close up, and, like, whatever.
Can I complain about the last few arcs of Yu Yu Hakusho, an anime from the 90s?
I mean...
Nobody watches anime that old, but okay, go on.
I certainly don't have any particular intention to watch Yu Yu Hakusho, so yeah, feel free.
Alright, well, if you want to watch Yu Yu Hakusho, which I don't recommend, I think it's pretty bad, I guess skip ahead a little bit. I'm going to complain about something. So they do this enormous tournament arc that I think has a little too much fat on it, but is pretty good because I think it is a lot of like, oh, this fighter is really good because he can fly, but his weakness is this, and can Yusuke like take advantage of that weakness because he's not very good at that, stuff like that. And toward the end of the tournament arc, it gets to be, well, this guy's just really fucking buff, and at the end of the tournament arc, or at the start of the next arc, they talk to their boss, and their boss is like, oh, well, I never told you this before, but we actually have a system for grading how tough people are, and all those guys that you fought that were like gonna end the whole universe, they were only C-list, and the next tougher guys are B, and then there's like the A-class demons, and then it's just like, and it makes it a little too literal, because then all the guys are just buffer than the last guy you saw.
Yeah.
It's very annoying. It's very bad. Yu Yu Hakusho really gets bad toward the end, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, like,
Anyway.
I feel like that's the trap you fall into when you think that, like, the meaning of, like, this first rule, or this, like, general concept of writing is that, like, the fights have to be real, which is not true. It is a basic misunderstanding of how writing works to think that, like, it actually means anything to say that, like, this guy's power level is greater than that one, right? Or that, like if I write, oh, this character is, like, skilled at ranged combat, but, like, is kind of fucked up close. There's nothing in that stops me from writing them winning an up-close battle, right? Like,
yeah.
Anyway.
This is the kind of stuff that leads to people arguing for, what has it been, 6 years? 5 years? About Rey beating Kylo Ren in Force Awakens?
Oh, God.
Sanderson's second law of magic. Weaknesses, limits, and costs are more important than powers.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
That seems like a good rule.
I feel like that is also, like, really... So that like, that's what makes it interesting to think about matchups in a way that isn't just about, like, what powers are good against what other powers, but also, like, what are people giving up? Anyway, it's good.
Yeah, like, in White Sand, they live in a desert, and they basically sand bend. Mm-hmm. But it costs water.
Oh,
and if
okay.
you run out of your little water-bending pouch of water, guess where your magic will start drawing your water from?
Oh.
Nice.
Your body. So you gotta be fucking careful.
I love a power that, like, hurts you when you use it too much.
I love it too. It's how I make my posts.
Yeah, this seems like a rule that's built around, like, creating character conflict, which is, like, a good rule, I think.
Sanderson's third law of magic.
The author should expand on what is already a part of the magic system before something entirely new is added, as this may otherwise entirely change how the magic systems fit into the fictional world.
I don't think I have a good grasp on what that means.
It sounds to me like what he's saying is you can't just pull shit out of your ass. You have to introduce things before they're used.
You should expend any use of the thing you already have before you start adding a new, different thing to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you should think about all the things that what you have can do, like allomancy, to skip ahead to Mistborn, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, this magic system has these rules and can do these things, and you should explore all of those things and how they interact with each other.
Before you're like, and now there's a new magic in
Right.
Mistborn.
Exactly. There's, like, a new skill tree.
Okay.
You should, like, because otherwise you'll, like, this is about, like, where the magic systems fit into the world as a setting.
Uh-huh.
And, like, if you aren't careful with what you're introducing, then you, like, have weird implications about the setting. Like, if you can bring people back from the dead, then you've, like, unintentionally created a setting where nobody wants to do that for no reason.
Yes.
Right.
Okay, yeah. This is one of those places where the comparison I've been making to, like, anime doesn't fit as well, because what I'm talking about is things where, like, one person has this power, but he's talking about a situation where, like, lots of people can use this power. So, like, you should assume that every single possible use of it has been worked out at some point by someone in history.
Right.
That makes sense to me.
Historical materialism, I think.
That's not historical materialism, but okay.
Anyway, this is also, I think Sanderson was one of the people who really pushed the divide between hard and soft magic.
Yes.
Oh,
Where,
I don't like that idea very much.
he popularized it, it says.
I mean, I'm not surprised that that would be a concept that Brandon Sanderson would introduce and would be in favor of, but I don't like it because I hate everyone who cares about what hard science fiction is.
Right.
Yeah.
It says it originates from hard and soft sciences, hard science fiction, hard fantasy, and soft science fiction.
I mean, gosh. Okay, perhaps maybe we don't have time for this right now, but I actually would love to know what Brandon's definition of hard fantasy is, because usually when people are talking about hard science fiction, they're like, oh, it has to be something that could happen in the real world, you know? Like, it has to be consonant with existing science, even if it's making up something that doesn't yet exist. Which is bullshit, because, like, once you're making something up, you've gone off the map. And there's no rules about, like, what types of what types of, like, science fictional ideas that you could introduce are more or less plausible. Like, people will treat faster than light travel as something where it's like, oh, you can have a hard science fiction story with this as long as, like, you make them deal with physics when they do it. But it's like, if faster than light travel is, like, not, as far as we currently understand physics, it's, like, not possible. And that doesn't mean that you shouldn't write stories with it, and it doesn't mean that you shouldn't write stories with it that give a feeling of realism and science, but, like, yeah, this shit just pisses me off.
It's also like there's like literal fact-based storytelling, or there's like hard like conveying that, even if it's not actually
but
like literally.
What I'm saying is that all fiction is the latter category. There's no such thing as fact-based storytelling because someone made up all the facts.
Right.
Yeah. There's also hybrid magic systems.
Oh.
Wikipedia says most magic systems in popular fantasy books fall somewhere between the spectrum of hard and soft magic, such as Harry Potter, Avatar: The Last Airbender, The Wheel of Time, and The Witcher.
It's just not a useful category. Like, I view something like hard science fiction or like hard fantasy, quote unquote, as like a specific aesthetic where like you are trying to create in the reader the idea that this is realistic. through the use of, like, certain tools, like these rules. And I really like that aesthetic. I think it's a good aesthetic, but it makes me so angry when people don't understand that it's an aesthetic and not a way of saying things that are true about the real world.
Right, and it, I'd never drawn this connection before, but it also being rooted in, like, ideas around, like, hard sciences, like physics, or soft sciences, like psychiatry or something. Fucking just a load of horse shit.
Yeah.
Like, that is a fake divide that is... It is a fake divide created by people who have an interest in, like, downplaying scientific contributions from other people. And it is, like, it shows up in gendered ways, it shows up in, like, class ways. Like, the divide between hard and soft science is stupid and not real.
And I do feel like it's worth noting, like, one of the ways in which I want to say that, like, Brandon is doing this whole quote-unquote hard science fiction or fantasy thing well, is that he's not totally ignoring social science. Like, we've talked about how there's a lot in this story that leaves us wondering, like, what's going on with the history and the culture and whatever. But he is thinking about the history and the culture, and he is thinking about, like, he is thinking about that in a way that has reference to real-world knowledge, right? Even though he is creating a fiction. And that's something that a lot of hard science fiction writers do not give a single shit about, because they think that history and sociology are, like, pussy shit for girls.
Right.
Unless it's a history of war.
Right, but even then they're not interested in, like, I mean, I was going to say they're not interested in real history of war, which is maybe a weird way of putting it. But you know what I mean. Like, they're not interested in understanding why certain things happen in the course of a war, unless it's in a very literal, oh, well, this technology was introduced kind of way,
Right, it's not history, it's lore.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of authors get interested in the, like, gamesmanship of, like, these two generals were like, oh, well, I'll do this sort of attack, and oh, I'll do this sort of defense. And, and, like, not like, oh, well, this army had more access to railroads, and so that's how they
This army had pigs.
Yeah, and, like, yeah, I think that's something you can say for Brandon Sanderson, is that, like, if he's gonna write a war, it's not gonna be about, like, two dudes sitting behind their consoles, like, making all the decisions. Like, there are gonna be some pigs in there somewhere.
Yeah.
Sometimes the pig has a spear and can fly.
Sure.
I think this goes without saying. I did want to briefly say I have been a little bit, like, booing and poo-pooing everything Brandon has said in this episode. I do really like Brandon Sanderson
None of these
novels.
are quotes from Brandon.
Right.
Except for the actual, like, laws.
Wait, sorry. Okay, the laws you're reading are things Brandon Sanderson actually wrote, right?
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
But the rest of the stuff I have listed has been from the Wikipedia page that is the Brandon Sanderson Wikipedia page. I bet I could find, like...
Here's him talking about this in an interview.
I mean, I know he has podcast episodes about them, on writing excuses. But I don't know, I'd have to go look and see if he's written.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I will say that, like, just by virtue of the fact that he's talking at all about the concept of hard fantasy, that means that he's not falling prey to the, like, dumbest shit of people who like hard science fiction, where, like, they really think it's really real. Like, they think they're predicting the future because they're talking about technologies that could theoretically happen. Like, he knows he's not talking about technologies that could be made in the real world.
Right. Yeah, people get really hung up on, like, oh, I like these William Gibson novels because they're real or something.
Jeff Gerstmann voice. Terminator 1 is real. That could fucking happen, man.
Like, if you're reading a book and it doesn't seem like it could really happen at all, then, like, it's not necessarily a very good book. I mean, okay.
Yeah. Perhaps
that's... Now I want to take that back, because I do feel like there are books where part of what they're trying to do is, like, a sense of unreality or whatever.
Like, I was just going to add that, like, a core thing that this page says about soft magic systems is that they are used differently to create wonder rather than to explain, like, the mechanics of what's happening.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that annoys me about that idea is that, like, okay, the page you're reading listed Harry Potter as being, like, midway between, like, soft and hard. But, like...
yeah, for some reason.
Yeah, in according to, like, my understanding of what these words should mean, Harry Potter is the softest shit ever, because there's no explanation for how or why any of this functions, and, like...
Not only is there no explanation, the, like, frame of, I guess, or, like... the possibility space for what is or is not allowed, or what consequences or what magnitude something has, is constantly shifting in really, like, weird and obtuse and sometimes just sloppy ways.
But the magic in Harry Potter also does not create wonder. The magic in Harry Potter is just, like, plot devices, and I think that's what magic, frankly, usually is in most of fiction that has magic. Like, I think the cases where it's successfully creating an aesthetic of realism or successfully creating an aesthetic of wonder are, like, good and, like, worthy of admiration, but the idea that it's all doing one of those two things, or that it's somewhere in a spectrum between those two things, is not... I don't agree.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, I talked earlier in the episode about Ursula K. Le Guin's Earthsea series, and that's, like, I, like, think that would be a very easy and classical example of, like, soft magic. Like, the rules are not explained. I don't know that there are rules.
It's all about feelings and shit.
But, like, it's... Le Guin is doing a lot more than just trying to, like, create the feeling of wonder. Like, there's a lot going on in everything going on with the magic, and just to reduce it down to wonder is, like...
This is such a... people who think that they love science fiction and fantasy love in ways that make it so much less than what it actually is. In another life, I thought I was going to be, like, a literary theorist writing about this shit. And so I've read a lot of definitions of what science fiction and fantasy, or speculative fiction, or whatever the fuck they want to call it, is. The one... You very often see people talking about it like, oh, this is the fiction that gives you a sense of wonder. And it's just like, why would you say that this whole, like, complicated and huge and weird genre is all about one emotion?
Right. Well, like, you know, I feel like a very, like, common narrative is that science fiction kind of begins with Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Mm-hmm. And there's not a lot of wonder in that book, you know?
I think there's, like...
There's some, but...
I feel like sometimes when people say that sense of wonder thing, what they really mean... The thing that they're talking about with wonder is maybe a little bit broader. Like, I feel like they include things that I would maybe describe as, like, a sense of horror, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think... I want to say I've actually seen someone point to the moment when Victor, like... realizes sort of what he's done and, like, just kind of turns away from it and goes to bed as, like, a sense of wonder moment, which is obviously not a positive thing, but...
Right. Yeah. No, that makes sense. I just, like... Yeah, the genre is a lot more than wonder, I think, for sure.
Yeah.
It's interesting that Frankenstein is science fiction, considering there's no science and it's not fiction.
Well, that's not what... Okay.
Frankenstein's real.
Okay. You're killing me here, Nora.
I think you've short-circuited both of our brains. I'm melting right now. Please, take us to the plug zone.
Yeah, so, Tilly, let's get some plugs going.
Yeah, sure. So...
The way you said that was very funny.
You can find me on the internet at Shar Asnaplunt on Twitter. And I also have another podcast, which I mentioned earlier in this episode, called Higgledy Piggledy Whale Statements, which is a podcast about Moby Dick. We're going through it a few chapters at a time. And that's on the Abnormal Mapping Podcast Network. So yeah, that's me.
Autumn, plug us up.
You can find me on Twitter at autumnal_coffee. I will not be plugging anything up. You totally just threw off my vibes. Terrible vibes in the plug zone today.
We're plugging. Plug it away in the plug mines.
On Twitter at autumnal_coffee. I do this podcast. I do export audio, also with Nora. I do...
It makes it sound like I'm featuring new funky mode of export audio.
You are the new funky mode. I do hot singles with my friend Regression. That's also on the Export Audio Network, and on Abnormal Mapping I do And Then an Aeroplane, which you should go listen to our episode that goes up today as we are recording this about Howl's Moving Castle, where Em and I absolutely trash a beloved film.
Again.
Yeah, we've done it.
Done it 4 times now.
I've seen that giant showed up from Twin Peaks, and he said it's happening again in front of a red curtain. And then we recorded a podcast where we were like, Hayao Miyazaki doesn't make very good movies.
That other guy though,
Takahata, incredible movies.
Yeah.
I was thinking that I might make a weekend project of, like, creating a sort of, like, homepage for export audio, because as I was doing these plugs, I was kind of like, there's not one good place that you can find all the podcasts that I do, so I own exportaud.io. Right now, it goes to the Patreon.
But it could go
somewhere
else.
Watch that space. Maybe it'll go to a Squarespace page.
Squarespace?
They're not sponsoring us.
Build it, beautiful.
I refuse to build anything.
You can find me on Twitter at...
I remember.
Wow.
I just wanted to throw off your vibes. I just wanted to mess
You
up
can find
vibes.
me on Twitter at Neither Nora. You can find most of the stuff I do at norablake.online. You can find the podcast at exportaud.io for now. I'm sure you will still in the future. It might make you click more than once to find it, though. You can donate to the Patreon at patreon.com/exportaudio.
And you should.
All patrons get access to some bonus shows.
They're gonna get like 5 minutes of cut content that was a little more explicit than we wanted this show to be.
Oh my god, you really... Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
No, good. I approve. I just didn't realize you were definitely doing that.
If you want a conversation from the last episode that was very explicit
but very informative about sperm whales.
That'll be in the Patreon soon, before this episode goes up that you're listening to. So,
I guess we can just take it to the close now, but did we have anything else we wanted to say? We talked about our books up front this time, so...
Yeah, I think we're pretty much all set.
Oh, we had a terrible idea for a sign-off.
I know.
And I just realized that there are 3 oaths, and there are 3 of us. But I don't want to do that.
We can do that.
It's just the trading thing.
It's just the only problem is that it's a reference to a book we won't read for 3 years.
Yeah, I actually...
Probably longer than that. Yeah, probably a bad idea. Probably not that.
So do we want to come up with an Elantris specific sign-off for this season of the podcast?
Problem is, like, we don't know what the plot is yet. Or, like, what people care about.
And remember, worship Shudareth. Stand Shudareth. I don't know.
Anyway, stream Janet.
Stan Janet.
We could say Stan Janeth. That's probably not questionable.
Who's Janeth?
The god
of their religion.
Probably questionable. I'm thinking probably questionable.
Probably less questionable than saying Stan Weirn the Fourth. Weirn Wolfden the Fourth.
Probably.
So...
We should just stop recording. We're done.
Until next time, you should,
If you're writing a magic system,
I'm gonna
follow
let you
these
squirm,
simple
I guess.
rules.
I have my finger over the stop button. But
I was gonna say something about, like, make your own Sheod and transform yourself into
The
a
undead?
better person.
This is